Hey there, Mark Lewis here from Mark's Money Secrets. And we've been hearing for years, how valuable gold is in which to invest. You should invest in silver and gold. Well, it used to be a pretty good thing, especially when our currency, before it was Federal Reserve notes, were backed by such commodities as silver and gold. And that was pretty great. But I want to caution folks who say, invest in gold. It's a storehouse of wealth. Is it? Or is it just a sham brought about by the media to get folks to go poor? Let's find out right now. Not too many decades ago, gold and silver were the standard of the American currency, the United States dollar. There was no such thing as a national bank called the Federal Reserve. In fact, until 1913, it was illegal to have a national bank because the founding fathers knew that any time a national bank showed up, the people would eventually be stripped of all of their power, their wealth, their ability to control the nation, and it would all go pear-shaped. That's what they were escaping from in Europe. Well, of course, so more than 100 years later, that's exactly where we are. The people are broke, far more broke now than we ever were during the Depression in the 1920s, probably, if you know the figures on that. So when we talk about gold, everybody gets excited about gold and silver as great places of storehouses of wealth. And I want to kind of catch that and say, is it really a storehouse of wealth? Or is it something else that they're not telling us? Let's say that $2,000 was worth a single troy ounce of gold, roughly about where it was, and where it's kind of been for a little while. And a nice suit, let's say this jacket's a Brooks Brothers, so I like Brooks Brothers, they kind of fit me well. A nice suit would be about $2,000, and that'll get you a nice jacket, a nice shirt, some nice pants, great pair of shoes, socks, and maybe even a hat. You're good to go. I mean, that's going to be nice. Probably better than Brooks Brothers, actually. So you could say that the value of 1 ounce of gold in 2024 would buy you a nice suit. That makes sense. In 1920, 100 or so years ago, 1 ounce of gold was roughly $20. Now, that's back when it was still on the gold and silver standard, and the United States declared that it was roughly an ounce of gold was about $20. Remembering not too long before that 1 ounce of gold was $1. But let's just say 1920, 1 ounce of gold, $1. And it just so happens that to buy a nice suit in 1920s cost you about $20. A nice jacket, nice hat, nice pants, socks, really nice shoes, and a good hat. And a hat was required in those days, of course. $20, 1 ounce of gold. Now, what does this mean exactly? Why is that so? What's the same? The commodities. You see, commodities rarely change value to each other. Commodity to commodity. Now, obviously, the thing that changes the price of a commodity relative to other commodities is supply and demand. And supply and demand is no joke, but it is not the same thing as inflation, nor does it really work connected or in any way with inflation. You see, if you had a gold mine and all of a sudden you realize you had a mountain of gold and you flooded the market with it, you'd have a massive supply, which would drop the price of gold relative to all the other commodities. Because all of a sudden on the planet, there'd be a lot more gold and a lot less need, or a lot less rarity and value to it. And in fact, the price of gold would probably drop significantly toward the price of silver in such a case. I mean, we're talking about a big mountain of gold here. However, if for whatever reason it became illegal to mine gold at all, gold would become extremely scarce, and all of a sudden the price of gold would shoot up. Now, notice this has nothing to do with inflation or the dollars or anything like that. It's just the supply and demand for a particular product in the planetary marketplace. But inflation is something completely different and has almost nothing to do with mercantile or market or commodity supply and demand. It has specifically to deal with its own subjective supply and demand. So for example, if you had $1 bill that was kind of encompassed all of the gross national asset of the United States of America, that would be a very worthy and very high dollar. That would be a very high value dollar bill indeed. But if we print $30 trillion bills to equal the same thing, then obviously that dollar bill just got devalued by 30 trillion times, because now every dollar of those $30 trillion is a portion, 1/30 trillionth, of the entire value of the United States of America. That's the fundamental nature of inflation. And while it does have to do with supply and demand, specifically around dollar bills, it doesn't have any particular market significance, except that you're taking the gross value of a country or of a government and then chopping it into smaller bits. The smaller the bits, the less valuable the dollar. And so, with respect to thing suits to gold, as a funny example, but it's working for us, gold hasn't changed value much in terms of what it affords a suit since 100 years ago to now. But the price of an ounce of gold versus the dollar, whether it's a Federal Reserve note or a gold-backed dollar, has gone way up. So we could suggest that gold is a good storehouse of value if that's all you want to do, store value. But it's a hedge against inflation. So as inflation goes up, the value of your gold actually purchases more Federal Reserve notes, and that's great. But commodity to commodity, gold really isn't giving you an appreciation in value, only in getting more Federal Reserve notes, and that's only because the value of Federal Reserve notes are going down. Your actual purchase power, thing to thing, gold to something else, isn't changing. Here's the ultimate example. 2,000 years ago, you wouldn't buy a suit, obviously. If you were in the Roman Praetorium and you were somebody there, you would buy a tunic, a very nice tunic, some kind of a hat, really nice shoes, sandals of some kind, obviously undergarments, and the sashes that you'd need. Now remember, in 1920, the same ounce of gold was about $20. And in 0001, when Jesus theoretically is running around back 2,000 years ago, an ounce of gold is roughly about 100 days' wages, 100 denarii or so. And that would buy you an extremely nice tunic combination of things that would get you to the Praetorium very, very nicely. And obviously, it's a little bit weird because they wouldn't use gold to buy those things back then. In fact, they would have given Praetoria credit, and then they could pay that later. But generally, value to value, even 2,000 years ago, gold would still only pay for the same things that it pays for now. So you have to ask yourself, while gold may be a great storehouse of value, is it a good storehouse for ongoing and growing value? And the answer has to be no. Again, unless we make gold mining illegal and gold becomes scarce somehow, and we have a big supply or a reduction in supply and a big demand, the value to value, thing to thing of gold is not there. Now, is it a hedge against inflation? Absolutely. Gold and silver and any other, ammunition, medical supplies to a certain degree, those all are hedges to inflation because, again, thing to thing doesn't necessarily change except for supply and demand. Obviously, we're talking some very rudimentary economics here, but it applies. As the value of the dollar drops dramatically because of the massive printing of them and their subsequent devaluing, the price of gold opposite a Federal Reserve note goes up. But an ounce of gold buys the same thing now that it bought roughly 2,000 years ago, thing to thing. So it isn't necessarily so that a commodity like gold or silver is going to give you actual value. Will it be a hedge against inflation? Absolutely. Anything that's a commodity base, ammunition, medical supplies, unless there's a supply and demand rush, is always going to hold its value against inflation because inflation is just the value of the currency going down and there's no other difference in the value of the items in which it's describing. So in the case of gold, if all of the gold mines on the planet shut down, the price of gold would skyrocket and you would get good value. But if that doesn't happen, or heaven forbid that there's somebody finds a mountain of gold somewhere and the value of gold goes down, the value of gold, thing to thing to thing, has not changed and will not change significantly for the next 2,000 years. So if you're looking for an actual appreciation of value, gold's not probably going to be it. If you're just looking for an inflation hedge, absolutely. But value, not really, no. So if this has been valuable to you and you've gotten an appreciation of value, please subscribe here. And we love walking people through the concepts involved with incorporation, which we haven't talked about much here. This has been kind of specifically around investment strategies and value with gold. But that's kind of what we do every day, is help people reduce taxes, protect assets, and preserve their legacy in corporate structures and incorporation. And if that's interesting to you, we've got tons of classes on the subject, books, and everything else. The link for our store is in the description. We also go live just about every day on Instagram at a handle of the same name as this here at YouTube. And we'd love to see you there. And if we don't, be wealthy.